So I got in my old truck, got on the road, and found myself in Guelph, Ontario, and picked something up. And we're back for another episode of the show we like to call the 59er Winder Show. Got a new shirt here, check that out. Skipped last week, so we kind of messed up our Friday kind of pattern. That's all good. As you can tell, my voice is different. Been a little under the weather last week, into the weekend. Kind of recovering from that a little bit. But we're back. And so as you saw in the little intro video, had a little bit of a road trip in the old Rust Bucket. Went out to Long and McQuaid in Guelph. They had an amp that I've been kind of hunting, and I've mentioned on this channel before. I've been hunting for the right deal, and one came up that I couldn't pass up, and I've been looking everywhere just to find that. And we got a Deluxe Reverb, and so I figured, there's a few different videos I want to do regarding the Deluxe Reverb that we're not going to do in this video. I just kind of want to kind of give the overall scope of like what amps I've had since the beginning to now, and why this one is pretty mind-blowing to me. So we got that. While I was hunting for the Deluxe Reverb, I was kind of thinking the Tone Master digital ones or tube, and I just couldn't get past the used price range I would see on Tone Master amps. For what it is, it might be a really solid, really good amp, but they're still fairly new, and to me, I don't know if I want to spend $1,000 on a used amp that is essentially a laptop inside the chassis. Being a graphic designer and having worked on with computers as the money-making tool for years, I kind of know that they don't last forever. Like I tend to rely on Apple computers. I find I buy a MacBook like this, and they tend to last me about 8 years. Whereas the PC counterpart, you're buying a new laptop every 1 to 2 years. And yeah, they're cheaper than the Mac, but I don't have time to kind of find out when I've got a deadline that, oh crap, I need to replace my laptop. So back to the amps, spending anywhere from, I've seen Deluxe Reverb, the Tone Master ones, used from like $800 to $1,200. I didn't want to spend that on something that could very well be the same experience as what I've experienced with laptops that just work until they just don't, and they usually stop working at the least convenient time. So when I saw this for about the same or less than the Deluxe Reverb Tone Masters I've been seeing, and seeing as, yeah, it's from a store, so I am paying tax on it, but it's a work tool, it made sense to go that route. So I went that route. Needless to say, Snakeboy, the old Deville, is going to be going on the chopping block and hopefully going to a home that will be loved and played and whatever. But we got the Deluxe Reverb, so and I'm pretty blown away by it. So I guess we'll just kind of go over like the amps I've had over the years, and kind of go why I'm blown away by this. So I started off, my very first amp was a Peavey Express 112, the teal one, 60 watts, loud as hell, and had a gain channel, a dirt channel, and that's all I knew. That's all I had. I grew up on that through grade school. Through high school, I had this amp. When I moved here for college, I still had that amp. I only played 2 other amps aside from that, really. One of them was one of my dad's buddies' Fender Twins. So it was like the black face, black panel with whatever you prefer. The black panel Fenders, is Fender Twin, huge and loud as hell. So you got the volume knob, you're turning it, you're not even at 1 yet. It's not making a sound. Then all of a sudden you get close to 1 and it's just super loud. And it just kept getting louder and louder to the point where you think it's distortion, but it's not the amp, it's your eardrums distorting. So I've always thought of the Fenders, like the black panel, silver panel Fenders, as just being really loud, really clean, high headroom amps. And with the different models, so you got, the Twin, you got the Super Reverb, the Vibrolux, the Pro Reverb, the Deluxe Reverb, the Princeton. I just assumed it was just that same amp, the same characteristics, just smaller wattages, but still the Princeton, still kind of going quite loud. So I just assumed they were all the same, just different power stages. So I never really liked Fender amps because of it. Eventually I kind of clued in on the Fender Tweed stuff, which I've always liked, but Fender amps were out of the question. And in high school, I jammed with some guys. One of the guys, he had a Marshall, it was a JCM 2000 and a 412 cab. And he said, hey, I'll play bass, you play guitar, because you can play more songs than I can. Like, cool. So I grabbed his guitar, opened the case, and it's like a 70s. I'm just thinking back at this. This is like pretty much like some Holy Grail type gear back then. And I didn't even think twice about it. I was like, oh, cool, that's a nice guitar. Opened the case. It was like a mid-70s Les Paul Custom in Alpine white, and it had yellowed to that cream, like that ideal cream color. So I played that through a Marshall with a 412, and that was the sound. It was like, oh, you've got the size, the low end, but not like low end as in it's too much bass or too flubby. It was good, tight, big low end. So it sounded like a big amp. And every other amp I had tried, like other Peavey combos and stuff like that, like combos always sounded small and boxy. And also, if you're hearing hiss, that's the 68 Custom Deluxe. It's just sitting there. Right? It does have a bit of a noise floor, but I don't care. So I always assumed small combo amps just sound small. So you have to get the bigger amps with lots of, bigger cab, 2 to 4 12s, kind of like these guys. Moved out to a house, in my own house after college, got a job, then you get your house because it was affordable back then, sort of. And I was playing my Peavey and it died. And I still have it, but it's still dead. I think the transformer died on it or something. And so I didn't have an amp. But when it died, I also found myself in a situation where I was no longer I was the only person paying the mortgage at that point. You know how things go in life? I kept the house because I didn't want to move. So money was tight. So I didn't buy another amp. So I played for the better part of, the rest of the time I lived in that house, just playing through software, through my computer. And at the time I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I got every amp under the sun at my fingertips. Started with, what was it? There was Amplitube and Guitar Rig. Those two were the ones that were kind of early on. So I was playing around with those for a number of years. And what I found was I missed just being able to sit down, turn on my amp and play and not fiddle with settings and stuff. Around that time, that's when Fender released the Mustang series digital amps. So I thought, well, that's kind of cool. It's kind of like the same basic idea of the software I've been using, but it's in an amp. And you can change your settings and save different presets and the whole bit. You don't have to stick with the stock factory presets. Cool. Looked into those, and a 40-watt combo with a 12-inch speaker was, I think at the time, like $199 plus tax, so under $250 Canadian. So one day I just said, screw it. On my way home, at that point I had moved. So I said, okay, well, after work I'm going to stop at the mall, grab one on my way home. So I did. So I had this Mustang amp. And it was pretty cool. You know, you got all these settings, everything at your fingertips, a lot of different amp models, and you had the tweeds and the Fender Blackface or Black Panel. I'll probably interchange those two names. I don't think guitar players are offended by that name because we know what it means pertaining to the panel on the amp. Anyways, it was cool. And so then I started playing around with sounds because the stock sounds, the cleans were good, but the dirty stuff like the crunch and the higher gain stuff wasn't great. So I spent hours and hours and hours dialing in different presets for that kind of stuff. And I got it sounding pretty good. And I had the amp sitting on a bench so that I could hear it better, thinking that was the better idea. And I tweak all my settings and I got it all perfect. And then as soon as I went from humbucker guitar to like say a Strat, everything went to shit. Nothing sounded right. So then I tweaked some more and it sounded good, okay with the Strat, and then I'd go back to the humbucker and all gone. So I basically had to either find a happy medium or have separate and that's what I ended up in the end, was separate presets for humbucker guitars and separate presets for single coil guitars. And even then I was still tweaking and the settings and stuff. And then I had a thought. I was like, why am I wasting my time playing through settings and editing and all this stuff? I'm not even playing guitar anymore. I'm playing a computer game within the amp as opposed to playing guitar. And so I sold that and I got, I guess, my first tube amp, which was an orange, because it was about the same price at the time, it was cheap, an orange Micro Terror head, those little tiny things. And I had a small 112 cab. And the sound, like as far as the sound consistency was better, because the Mustang, as soon as you'd get it sounding good, and then you moved it from one part of the room to another part of the room or another room, it would change the sound drastically as well. You had to basically keep the amp where it was. At least with the orange, it would sound the same pretty much no matter where you put it. But it sounded like a small, tiny little box. And I didn't like that. I wanted the big sound. Around that time, I was working on guitars for people, and I had started rewinding pickups and then winding my own, sort of like the birthplace of my 59er. And around that time, the Canadian dollar was pretty much on par with the American dollar. So I was able to go to Mojotone and order an amp kit. And to keep things cheap, I just bought the chassis and parts kit, and then I sourced the tubes locally, and I made my own head cab. Out of Home Depot project wood, and I got some Tolex. I Tolexed it, nice little clear faceplate with my name on it. You know, I wrote Romaine Amplification. My wife hand drew the logo, and then I had that die cut onto a piece of plexiglass, which was in the amp. Here, I'll just post a picture of that cab or that amp in that state here. So I had that. So I bought this kit and I figured, well, how hard can it be? Wired up the amp, everything worked fine, and it sounded awesome. And so I put it in the head cab, and I got this cab here. I think it's an old Trainer cab. It's massive. And it was cut for a big 15-inch bass speaker in the middle. And I bought it gutted, and not even Tolex on it, for $20. And I got a hold of two cheap 12-inch speakers, and I got a piece of plywood for the front to cut out two 12 holes. So that, with this amp, it just sounded huge, and I started to get that sound like that Marshall back in high school. So at that point, I was like, okay, I get the whole tube thing. Tubes is what I like, and you need at least like 45 watts and up to get that big, full sound. And that's where I cut my teeth on a single channel tube amp, where you use boosts and overdrives set with low gain and high volume to coax more gain out of a JTM 45, which is this one. And that's what I had for a number of years after that, never looked back. But making pickups and testing stuff and trying to get into more modern spec pickups and stuff, testing that through a JTM 45 doesn't quite get you the right the right feedback sonically that you're looking for to see if you're on the right track. So that's where I started looking at amps again. Side note quickly, I did 2 Christmases ago, I ended up scoring this head cab, a Marshall. It's actually not a Marshall, it's a Derek Bell. He's a guy in I think Oshawa, Ontario, who makes these really nice cabs and stuff. And then I stuck the Marshall logo on it. It just, the cab that I made for it, over time, it just started to wear down and break apart. And it felt it needed a good solid cab to live the rest of its life in. So that's why it's in a Marshall cab now. But that is the amp that I wired and modded and stuff. But needing to expand into different sound, like more modern amp sounds, I ended up picking up a Peavey 6505 MH, the 20 watt head for cheap. I got that used, and it had that modern sound, it had that EVH sound, right? Just like the 5150s and stuff, loads of gain. But it was almost too much. And very dark sounding amp, at least in my experience with the cabs that I have. So like with everything, you sell something to buy something else. So I ended up getting a combo. Oh no, before that I had an Egnater Tweaker 15, which sounded great, but sounded small and boxy. So that didn't last very long here. Then I got the Peavey, the 6505 MH. And sounded good, but I wanted a bit more out of it. The cleans weren't the greatest, and the gain was either way too much, or when I'd get it to like crunchy and high gain, like the gain was barely on, so the amp wasn't as open. And I think that's why it sounded dark. You needed to turn certain things up a bit. No matter how loud it was, like how loud the volume was, you needed gain at a certain point for the amp to start to open up, or else it would be dark or nasal. So I figured, oh, maybe it's just not the amp for me. So I got rid of that, and I ended up getting a Sonzera 50 combo amp, 50 watt, small, like, not much bigger than the Deluxe in size, but 4 times the weight. Got it home, and the tubes were fried, so I swapped the tubes, and then I got it sounding good. But the clean channel always had this weird buzzing noise. Had a beautiful clean sound, but you kept hearing that buzzing. And I just couldn't ignore it. And I looked up how to fix that or whatever. And there was a lot of techs on YouTube that were trying to find the same problem and how to fix it. Some did, but it was a big rabbit hole or whatever trail of, trying to figure out where that sound was. And then the gain sound, it was very woolly and had the same problem as the 6505, where if you got the gain down to where it's good, it wouldn't be open. It would, you'd have to turn it up to open that up, but then it got too much gain and too woolly, and then we get fizzy. So I got rid of that. I traded that for an Archon 50 head and the Archon cab, which I still have. The Archon's gone, but the Archon was better than the Sonzera, but it had 2 problems that I couldn't get past. One was a noisy effects loop, which I could probably have dealt with had it not been for the other problem, which was it had this hardwired in certain mid-range frequency to the bass tone, and the mids knob kind of changed the shelf of where the mids was, and the treble was more of a high mids kind of knob. So you can never really tune out that weird mid characteristic. And so I was always turning knobs. It sounded better when you cranked it up loud, but it would peak at a certain point where I didn't like it. So I put it up for trade or sale because I just couldn't get past that. Beautiful amp otherwise. The clean was even better than the Sonzera, and noise free as long as you didn't use the effects loop. Put it up for sale or trade, and I ended up trading for an amp that I knew I didn't like, but it seemed like a fair trade because the resale values. So I traded for a dual Mesa Boogie dual rec, and I tried to make that amp sound good and work for me. And I could get it to sound okay, but I felt like I was always back again, constantly tweaking the EQ, and I was playing the knobs more than I was guitar. So I put it up for sale, and I sold it. And when I did, that's when the Shiva came up for sale. So I jumped on that real quick before that sold to someone else. And that's where I scored that after the sale of the dual rec. And what I like about the Shiva is it has some of the characteristics of the Archon that I did like, and some of the characteristics of the dual rec that I did like as well, minus all the other stuff I didn't like, all into one amp that isn't either of those amps still. I don't know if that makes sense or not, probably not, but that's when I got that. Sometime between getting rid of the Sonzera and the Archon, I also sold a bunch of stuff, and I scored the Bogner XTC 3534. Yeah, that small guy right here. Again, it was up used for sale and at a good price, and I had the cash because I sold some stuff, and I picked it up, and immediately I liked that better than the Archon tonally, which is another reason why I couldn't get the Archon to dial into where I wanted it. Essentially because I wanted it to be an amp that it wasn't, I guess. So that's where this all went. Then I joined a band, and I started jamming with some guys. We decided, let's make this a band, and maybe we'll start playing shows in pubs and bars and stuff like that. And that's when I realized, okay, not all of the places have a stage that has room for a big head and cab and the space, or you don't have the time, right? Sometimes you're playing with other bands, so you got to go up there, set up really quick, and then when you're done, tear down really quick and get the hell out of Dodge. Also, sometimes you're playing in areas that kind of a sketchy area where you don't really want to do 2 trips to and from your car and leave gear in the car unattended. So then it was like, okay, I need to go back to a combo. So I ended up getting the Deville. And the Deville fits the bill. It's not the greatest amp, but use the clean channel with the pedals I'm using. It does the job. The problem I'm starting to get, because I'm getting older, is it's a fairly big amp size-wise. It's not much smaller than this oversized 212 here. And it's like 55, 60 pounds, right? So because it's big and bulky and it's that heavy, it's starting to get hard to get in and out and stuff. And that's also the one that I use when we go for band practice. So carrying that back and forth is a chore. So I wanted something smaller and lighter, and that's where this whole Tone Master or smaller amp goes. But I always had that thing in the back of my mind thinking, but you need a big amp if you want that big sound. So I was looking at anything 212, and I settled for the Deville with the 410s, but then the Deville with 212s is even heavier than the 410s. And the Deluxe Reverb, the tube one, kept coming up, and a lot of Nashville guys are playing it, but it's like not a lot of them are really, I don't think they're playing the hard rock that our band sometimes covers. But I took a chance on this one, thinking how bad can it be, because we're also talking about lowering our stage volume, and digital is one way, right? The Tone Master being able to turn the standby and have no sound out of the speaker but still run the XLR out, cab sim to front of house, you'd have totally silent. That was an attractive feature, but tubes is just tried and true, man, and it's serviceable and it's not a laptop in there. So when I saw that for a price that I could not look away, I pulled the trigger and got some stuff for sale, and I'll be selling the Deville. And we got this, and let me tell you, it'll do everything that any of these amps can do just as well, but it sounds huge. In the room, it sounds as big as any of these amps here. It sounds huge, and it can take gain pedals perfectly well. Like we've done the Super Reverb Tone Master video in the previous video, where we tried with my pedal board for the cover band stuff using the Deville on the Tone Master, and eventually once I figured out the amp, it could do it. This can do it. It sounds way better than both those amps. So I'm really happy about this amp. So I'm gonna do better. I think so. I've got two ideas here for future videos. I want to compare this with my pedal board, this amp and the Deville, to kind of show the difference between the two and why I'm picking this one. And also as a send-off to the old Snakey, right? The Snakeskinned Deville. And I also want to eventually do a sound test with this amp between the stock speaker, which is a V-type speaker. I'm not really a fan of the V-type, although in this amp it sounds good. In the Sonzera, the V-type didn't sound good. And in the PRS Archon 212 cab, they didn't do the trick either. So I got rid of those too. But in here don't sound bad, but I keep reading that the Neo Creamback is a really good speaker for this amp. And I'm a big Creamback fan. I've got Creambacks in both of these cabs. And I like the idea of the Neo Creamback being a lighter, shave half the weight of the speaker just by changing to that speaker in this amp. So it'll make it a 40-pound amp down to like 35 pounds probably. So even lighter. So that's kind of what I'm after. So I think those two videos will be future videos. We're already at the 30-minute range. Hopefully I could trim this down so we're not, an hour in of me just talking about fucking amps. So we'll do some sound stuff just through the camera here, very basic. We'll see what that captures. I'll eventually do, like with the other future videos, we'll mic it up and do it right, or as right as I can try. But if you're on the fence about a deluxe reverb, just do it. Just do it. It does not sound like a small 22 watt amp, and it's not quiet. Like it goes loud. Like it goes almost as loud as the Deville, which was already way too loud to begin with, even in a 5-piece rock band. So like there's your Fender clean, man. We're playing the Burst replica today. Oh yeah, we'll cut my hair out. I'm at the point where I think I'm just gonna break down and cut this shit. I have to sell a pedal and then I'll pay for a haircut. Just a really beautiful clean. It's awesome. But it can do gain. So we've got the Bogner XTC blue pedal. Add a bit of drive to that. It just sounds like real amp distortion. And yes, you can crank these up on the volume and have the amp break up, and it sounds glorious. The thing that got me onto these amps is this video right here. I don't know how to link it, but I'll have a thumbnail right here of the video and a link below to go see that video where he shows you what you can do with a deluxe reverb, and that's what sold me on starting to hunt for these and getting one now, different model, but getting a version of that now. It's exactly what I've been hearing on that video. So that's with the Bogner Overdrive. I'll throw on the boost and the Mosky clone thing just to show. I'm also going to drop the reverb just to show that it can do like hard rock stuff too. Like, is it the best amp for it? No, I mean, the Shiva will do that stuff better, but this does it just good enough, especially for a grab and go. So the reverb's down. Here's with the boost, with the clone. Right, you can do it. And then just rolling the volume back. So I don't know how well the camera caught that. It captured it, but like I said, this wasn't like to show you how like the best representation of what it sounds like in the room. This is just an iPhone camera capturing this sound. But man, these are awesome amps. So, you know, all the amps I've went through, and I really like a big sound. I don't like it when it sounds small and tubby, or sound like it's a pedal. And this amp sounds huge in the room. Like I said, as big as the other ones. So if you're like me and you like you don't want an amp that sounds tiny, but you also don't want a full stack, or you don't want 100 watts or 22 watts. These amps are awesome. Just really awesome. I can't say anything bad about these so far. So I will be gigging with this. We have a show on Saturday in Chatham somewhere. And then after that, we got a show at Doghouse here in town, and I'll be using this, and we'll see how well it holds up. But in a future video, we'll compare that to the Deville, and with better mic'd up sound, and we'll also eventually do a speaker swap and see how that goes. And I'm sold on the Deluxe Reverb. It's a great amp. It's small enough. It's light enough. It's sort of what I've been looking for years. Had I ended up with this amp instead of the Mustang years and years and years ago, I don't know. I think I'd still, maybe I'd have less amps. You know, I probably wouldn't have built the Marshall. Hard to say, but Deluxe Reverb, wicked amp. So that's the episode. I don't know. I talked a lot. Fuck, there's not a lot of sound stuff, but I kind of wanted to just set the stage for why this amp really blew me away. Because it's so small and portable, but it sounds so huge. I've never played through an amp like this. I mean, did the Fender Twin fill a room? Heck yeah, but that's like what, 100 watts, two 12-inch speakers, and more headroom than you know, so much headroom that it's not even fathomable. So, but this is only 22 watts. It's tiny, and it fills the room as well as any other amp in this room, and that's pretty awesome. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. If we've gained a few subscribers, so awesome for that. And hopefully you get something from that. If you're on the fence on buying one of these, just do it, because you probably won't regret it. Probably, maybe not. I'm not like everybody, so grain of salt. If you're on the fence about one, go try one out. How's that? Bring your pedal board, try it out. I'll tell you right now, with the Bogner XTC blue pedal, it sounds awesome. I've tried it with the ODR1. It sounds pretty good too. If you crank this puppy up, you don't really need a pedal to get nice gain. So go play guitar, and maybe we'll do another video sometime soon.